Number 25. That's the number of boys in my family whom I've observed to have circumcision. Children and grandchildren. This Sunday, yesterday, we were at the circumcision of our latest grandchild, and his name is Menachem Mendel, and he's circumcised. And the Moel is a religious Jew whose father I studied with in rabbinical school, an expert and God-fearing person, and I have no fear of any kind of herpes or any kind of communicable disease from this mohel, because a truly God-fearing mohel doesn't get those diseases. Those diseases are sexually transmitted, and that's not his lifestyle. It's outside of his lifestyle. And so those of us who are fortunate to live in this type of religious community aren't worried about the horrific things that people accuse Jewish people about. But they still accuse us of child mutilation, causing terrible, irrevocable damage to the sexual sensitivity of our children and grandchildren, and that this is a horrible and brutal, barbaric activity. And so let's look at the facts. I have, Baruch Hashem, sons and grandsons, different ages. They're well adjusted, they're non-violent, and successful, and productive, and delightful. Circumcision has not harmed them in any possible way. Has it helped them? Again, from the point of view of a religious man, the Torah says you're supposed to do it, then because God says so in the Torah, it has to help. It has to be good. And all of the evidence that we've gathered over the last 100 years, the people against circumcision, who hate religion and hate anyone who tells them what to do. You see, this is part of the sexual revolution, the revolution that demands there should be no fetters, no stigmas upon human sexuality. Human sexuality has byproducts. It's called children. There are other byproducts called diseases that are transmitted when human sexuality is irresponsible. It's also a fact. The fact is that those who follow the Torah would not ever get sexually transmitted diseases, except in fluky cases, because they don't engage in illicit sexual behavior. And because we're monogamous, and because we follow certain protocols regarding human sexuality, there will be less diseases in these families. Cervical cancer for observant women was essentially not known prior to this last generation, because Jewish women used to keep the family purity laws, and Jewish women were monogamous. And as a result of that, they had almost no cases of cervical cancer. Those who are circumcised have almost no cases of penile cancer. the truth is that independent studies have indicated a tremendous value in the prevention of sexually transmitted diseases if the males were to be circumcised. The arguments that are given against this is they take Europeans and they say Europeans should have the same results as Americans. Europeans are extremely hygienic conscious. Very few Europeans would not wash themselves to a fault. Their care in these elements and these things is far greater than Americans. Americans are spontaneous and become careless, including in their sexual practices. And so to compare Europeans with Americans is like comparing Martians to Jovians, those who live in Jupiter. Two different areas of the world, two different types of customs. But we who are religious, we who follow the Torah, don't have to worry about those things. Because you see, the Torah forbids illicit sexual activity. The Torah restricts sexual activity to certain times when the woman is most fertile. The Torah teaches a person to be sexually responsible, which includes that if you're a father, you've got to take care of your children. And as a community, we have to make sure that children are cared for and educated and housed and clothed and fed. And so, what can I say to the anti-circs? I say to you that come into my world. Come into this world where people are responsible, where people don't do things just because it feels right, where they do things because it is right and it is good, and it promotes healthy activity. And circumcision is part of that equation. Circumcision and family purity and the restrictions on relations before marriage or outside of marriage are all healthy for a healthy community. Those who engage in deviant sexual practices or illicit sexual practices or open sexual practices or free sexual practices open themselves up to all kinds of problems. Now, those problems are non-existent in a truly religious environment. All of those horror stories of infected Moalim deal with Moalim who are not in our communities, deal with Moalim who are themselves not religious, who behave just like you do. But the Moal that we had is a Moal that we know is a fearer of God. And guess what? The children he circumcised, they will also fear God. And they will also be healthy and be good and happy. Just as our grandson, Menachem Mendel, son of Sholem Dovber, will be happy, healthy, enthusiastic, responsible, learned, and Hasidic.